Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. When I was a little kid, my name was Nathan, and I had a best friend named Sophie. We were pretty much inseparable. I remember how we used to spend every afternoon together after school, playing in her big, sunny backyard. Sophie had this huge box of dolls, and we would spend hours dressing them up. I loved picking out their outfits, matching the colors, and even brushing their hair. It was so much fun, and I felt really happy doing it. Sometimes I wondered why I enjoyed it so much, but I didn't think too much about it. I was just a kid, after all. We also used to go clothes shopping with Sophie's mom. I was fascinated by all the different styles and colors in the girls' section. I remember feeling a bit sad that I couldn't try on any of those clothes. It was like a world I could look at but never be a part of. But still, I loved giving Sophie advice on what to pick. She always said I had a great eye for fashion. One day, Sophie had this idea to give me a makeover. She brought out her mom's makeup kit and started applying some to my face. I sat there feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. When she finished, I looked in the mirror and I couldn't believe it. I looked different, but a good kind of different. It was like seeing a side of me I never knew existed. We spent the whole afternoon playing dress-up. Sophie lent me some of her clothes, and we pretended to be at a fancy party. It was the most fun I'd ever had. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, like all the pieces just fit. But then things started to change. As we got a bit older, I began to feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing these things. I heard some boys at school talking about how playing with dolls or liking girl stuff was weird for a boy. I didn't want to be weird. I wanted to fit in. So I started to push those feelings away. I stopped playing with dolls and didn't go clothes shopping with Sophie anymore. I tried to be more like the other boys, even though it didn't feel right. I remember one day Sophie asked me if I wanted to play with the dolls again, like old times. I said no. I told her that I was too old for that now. She looked really sad, but she didn't say anything. I felt sad too, but I thought it was for the best. As time went on, things between Sophie and me started to drift. We talked less, and then I switched to a different school. It wasn't long before we lost touch completely. I missed her, but life moved on. I had new friends and new things to do, but deep down, I still missed those afternoons playing in her backyard, being myself without worrying about what others thought. Even as I tried to fit in and be like the other boys, there was always this feeling inside me, like something wasn't quite right. I kept thinking about those days with Sophie and how happy I was then. It was a happiness I hadn't felt in a long time. But I kept pushing those thoughts away, telling myself it was just silly kid stuff. But no matter how hard I tried, those feelings wouldn't go away. They were a part of me, and I was starting to realize that maybe they always had been. That maybe, just maybe, there was more to me than I had ever let myself see. I still had a long way to go to understand these feelings. But looking back, those childhood days with Sophie were the first clue to figuring out who I really was. They were innocent and carefree, full of laughter and discovery. And even though I didn't know it at the time, they were the first steps on a path that would lead me to find my true self. Time flew by really fast, and before I knew it, I was no longer the little kid who played with dolls in Sophie's backyard. I was a teenager going to a new school where nobody knew about my past. In this new place, I tried really hard to be like the other boys. I joined sports teams, talked about things they liked, and did my best to fit in. But inside, I felt different, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. At night, when I was alone in my room, I'd think about those days with Sophie. I missed how easy and fun everything was. But those were just thoughts I kept to myself. During the day, I was just Nathan, the regular guy at school. As I got older, those feelings I tried to hide didn't go away. They grew stronger. I started to read stories online about people who felt the same way I did. People who felt they were born in the wrong body. I saw pictures of them before and after they changed, and something inside me clicked. It was like a light turned on, and I saw a path that I never knew was there. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, trying to understand what it all meant. I knew I was different, but I didn't know what to do about it. It was scary and confusing, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I wasn't. So I decided to talk to my parents. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I was so nervous, my hands were shaking, and my voice was all shaky. But I told them everything, how I felt, what I read online, and what I thought it all meant. My parents were surprised, but they listened. They didn't understand everything, but they said they loved me no matter what. That meant a lot to me. It was like a big weight lifted off my shoulders. After that talk, things started to change. I met with doctors who helped people like me. They were really nice and explained a lot of things. They talked about hormones, which are like magic potions that can change your body to be more like how you feel inside. It sounded amazing and scary at the same time. I thought a lot about it and decided to start taking hormones. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt right. So I began this new part of my life, taking a small pill every day. It was a little thing, but it felt like a big step. Slowly, I started to change. My body began to look different, and I felt different too in a good way. It was like I was finally becoming the person I was meant to be. But it wasn't all easy. Some people at school noticed the changes and started asking questions. Some were mean, calling me names and laughing at me. That hurt a lot. But I tried to stay strong and remember who I was doing this for. Me. I also had to think about what name I wanted. Nathan didn't feel right anymore, so after a lot of thinking, I chose Natalie. It was a name that made me feel happy every time I said it. Becoming Natalie wasn't just about changing how I looked. It was about being true to myself. I stopped trying to fit in and started to just be me. I began to wear clothes that I liked, which were mostly girls' clothes. I let my hair grow long, and sometimes I'd even put on a little makeup. Every small change made me feel more and more like myself. I had to learn a lot of things, like how to do my hair in different styles or which clothes looked best on me. I remember standing in front of the mirror, trying on different outfits and seeing how they looked. Some days I felt really happy with what I saw, and other days, not so much. But that's just part of figuring things out. But it wasn't all tough. There were so many good things about being Natalie. For one, I could finally express myself the way I always wanted to. I wore pretty dresses that swirled around my legs when I walked, and cute tops that made me feel stylish. I loved experimenting with makeup, adding a bit of color here and there. It was like painting a picture, and my face was the canvas. I also made some new friends who liked me for who I was. They didn't care about my past. They just saw me as Natalie. We'd hang out, go to movies, and talk about all sorts of things. It was nice to have people around who understood me. My family was a big support, too. My mom and dad tried their best to understand what I was going through. They made mistakes sometimes, like calling me Nathan by accident, but they were trying, and that meant a lot. They were there for me, just like they said they would be, and that helped me through some tough times. The hormones I was taking were working, too. My body started to change in small ways at first, and then more and more. It was fascinating to see the transformation. Every little change was a step closer to the person I felt like inside. Through all these changes, there was one thing I kept thinking about. Sophie. I wondered what she was doing now and if she ever thought about me. I remembered our days playing together and how much fun we had. She was my first friend who saw a part of me that no one else did. One day, I decided to visit my old town to relive old memories, so I got on a bus and went back to the place where I grew up. Walking around my old neighborhood was strange. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. I walked past my old school, the park where I used to play, and then down the streets where Sophie and I used to ride our bikes. It was like stepping back in time. I ended up at the supermarket where my mom used to take me. I walked through the aisles, looking at all the things on the shelves, and then in the cereal aisle, I saw her. Sophie. She was there, picking out cereal just like any other day. My heart started beating really fast, and I didn't know what to do. Should I say hi? Would she even recognize me? I took a deep breath and walked up to her. Sophie? I said, my voice shaking a little. She looked up, confused. Yes? Do I know you? she asked, looking at me like I was a stranger. Standing there in the cereal aisle with Sophie looking at me, a million thoughts raced through my mind. How do I explain everything? Would she understand? Taking a deep breath, I decided to just tell her the truth. Hi, Sophie, it's me, Nathan. Well, I'm Natalie now, I said, trying to sound as calm as I could. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. Nathan, is that really you? She asked, her voice filled with disbelief. I nodded, feeling a bit nervous. Yes, it's me. I know I look really different now. For a moment, there was just silence. Sophie was staring at me, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. It's good to see you, Natalie, she said. Her smile was warm and kind, just like I remembered from when we were kids. We stood there, talking in the supermarket, right next to the cereal boxes. I told her about everything that had happened since we last saw each other, how I had struggled with who I was, how I decided to become Natalie, and everything that came with it. Sophie listened to every word. She didn't interrupt, just listened. It felt good to talk to someone who knew me from before, someone who saw me change so much. After I finished telling her my story, Sophie shared what she had been up to. She talked about school, her new hobbies, and how much our old town had changed. It was nice to catch up, but there was still a bit of awkwardness in the air. Then Sophie suggested we go to a coffee shop to talk more. I thought it was a great idea. So we left the supermarket and walked to a nearby cafe, the same one we used to visit with our parents when we were little. Sitting at a small table with our drinks, we started to talk more freely. It felt like the old days, but also completely new. I was no longer Nathan, the boy she used to play dolls with. I was Natalie, and I was happy to be myself. Sophie asked me a lot of questions about my life now, and I answered them as best as I could. She seemed really interested and wanted to understand everything. It made me feel good knowing she cared. We talked about the past, too, about our fun times playing together. Sophie laughed as she remembered how I used to give fashion advice to her dolls. I laughed, too, feeling a sense of nostalgia. It was strange and wonderful at the same time, sitting there with my childhood friend, now as Natalie. We had grown up and changed, but in some ways we were still the same kids who loved playing together. As we talked, I realized how much I had missed Sophie. She was an important part of my past, a friend who made me feel happy and accepted. And here she was, doing the same thing all over again. The day passed quickly, and before we knew it, the sky was turning dark outside. We had spent hours talking, laughing, and remembering. It was one of the best days I had in a long time. As we said goodbye outside the coffee shop, Sophie hugged me. I'm really happy for you, Natalie, she said. You seem so much happier now. I hugged her back, feeling a bit emotional. Thank you, Sophie. It means a lot to hear that from you. We promised to keep in touch and not let years pass by without talking again. It was a promise I intended to keep. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. It was like a part of my past had come back, but in a good way. I was excited to see her again, to talk more about everything. We had agreed to meet at the same coffee shop, and I couldn't wait. As I got ready, I chose my outfit carefully. I picked a soft pink sweater and a pair of jeans that I really liked. I brushed my hair until it fell just right and added a little bit of lip gloss. Looking in the mirror, I felt happy with what I saw. I was Natalie, and I was going to meet my old friend as my true self. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Sophie was already there, waiting for me with a big smile. Hi, Natalie, she said, waving me over. We ordered our drinks and found a cozy spot in the corner. It felt like we were in our little world, away from everyone else. Sophie started asking me more questions about my life now. She wanted to know about my friends, what I liked to do for fun, and how my family was handling everything. I told her about my new friends, the ones who accepted me for who I was. I talked about going to the movies, shopping, and just hanging out like any other teenager. I also shared with her how my parents were doing. They're trying their best, I said. It's not always easy, but they really are trying to understand and support me. Sophie nodded, listening carefully. That's really good to hear, she said. It sounds like you're surrounded by people who care about you. We also talked about school. I told her how some days were hard, with people looking at me strangely or saying mean things. But I also shared the good parts, like my favorite classes and the teachers who were really nice. Sophie seemed really interested in everything I was saying. It felt good to have someone who wanted to know all about my life, the good and the bad. Then it was Sophie's turn to share. She talked about her school, her friends, and her plans for the future. She wanted to go to college and study art. She even showed me some pictures of her paintings on her phone. They were really good, full of bright colors and interesting shapes. I was amazed. "Sophie, these are amazing," I said, looking at the pictures. "You're so talented." She blushed a little. "Thanks, Natalie. I've been working really hard on them." As we talked, I realized how much we still had in common. We both loved art, movies, and just talking about life. It was like no time had passed at all, even though everything had changed. We spent the whole morning in that coffee shop, talking and laughing. It was one of those perfect moments where everything just felt right. When it was time to leave, Sophie gave me a big hug. "Let's not wait years to do this again," she said. "Promise me we'll stay in touch." "I promise," I said, hugging her back. "I won't let us lose touch again." Walking back home, I thought about everything that had happened. Meeting Sophie again, reconnecting, and sharing my life with her. It was more than I could have ever hoped for. In the days that followed my reunion with Sophie, everything seemed a bit brighter. We texted each other almost every day, sharing little bits of our lives. It was like having a piece of my past back, but in a new and exciting way. We started hanging out more, going to the park, the movies, and sometimes just walking around town. It was fun, just being together and talking about everything and nothing at the same time. One afternoon, while we were sitting in the park, Sophie told me something that surprised me. She said she always knew I was different, even when we were kids. She remembered how I loved playing with dolls and dressing up, and she thought it was cool. "I always admired how you just liked what you liked, no matter what anyone else thought," she said, smiling at me. That made me think about all the times I had felt weird or out of place. Hearing Sophie say that made me realize that maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Maybe there were people who understood me more than I knew. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.